Kenny Harmon had spent 22 years of his life working for Western Plains Manufacturing. He was the lead foreman, a pillar of the company, respected and trusted by everyone who mattered. But when the email hit his inbox, the one notifying him that his position had been eliminated, replaced by someone younger and cheaper, it was as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He could hardly believe it at first, not the least because he was certain his work had been exemplary. There were whispers that the company was making cuts to save money, but Kenny never thought they would come for him. He was too valuable, too experienced. His father had worked for Western Plains before him, and now Kenny was being tossed aside like a worn-out piece of machinery. After the initial shock wore off, anger bubbled up inside him, and it wasn't the impotent kind of anger that fades with time. No, this was a fire that burned in his chest as he stared at the email, knowing that the company's new management had just made a colossal mistake. They were betting on a younger, cheaper supervisor, but they didn't realize the kind of damage that was about to unfold. The decision was made. And though they had tried to cushion the blow with severance and benefits, Kenny knew the truth. They didn't want him anymore. What did they think was going to happen? They thought they could just replace him and everything would stay the same. Kenny didn't know if it was his pride or his sense of justice, but he knew one thing for sure. They were going to regret this. 6 months passed, and things at Western Plains started to unravel. What had once been a smooth-running, efficient operation had now turned into a chaotic mess of broken machinery, failed systems, and mounting tension. It became clear that the cheaper supervisor, the new guy they had brought in, wasn't up to the task. Kenny couldn't ignore it. The failures were glaring. Equipment that should have been maintained properly was breaking down at an alarming rate. The work floor was in disarray. Kenny knew the old system like the back of his hand, and the maintenance schedules that had been tossed aside were now proving their worth, or lack thereof. It was only a matter of time before something catastrophic happened, and he knew it. It was only a matter of time before someone paid the price for the company's short-sightedness. Kenny's phone buzzed one morning, the name on the screen sending a chill down his spine. Jason Weber. Jason, the new floor manager, was over his head, and everyone knew it. He had called Kenny in the past, desperate for advice, and Kenny had helped him, though not as often as he would have liked. "Hey, Kenny, I think we need to talk," Jason said, his voice strained. "You might want to get over here." Kenny could hear the stress in his voice, the panic. He had expected this moment, but the feeling of knowing it was now was different. It was one thing to see the signs, to predict the fallout. It was another to feel it slamming into him with the weight of inevitability. By the time Kenny arrived at the plant, it was clear that things were bad, really bad. The production line had ground to a halt, the machines sitting like dead giants, and all around him there were hushed conversations, frantic calls, and nervous glances exchanged between the workers. Kenny's eyes scanned the room, landing on Jason, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot. He walked over to Kenny, barely acknowledging the others around them. "I don't know what happened, Kenny," Jason said, his voice almost a whisper. "The press, the heart of the production line, it's down and nothing is working. It's like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong." Kenny was silent for a moment, looking at the massive machine that had been the cornerstone of their operation. There it sat, completely still, as if it was trying to tell him everything he needed to know. "You told them," Kenny said softly. "You told them this would happen." Jason nodded, but it was too late for regrets, too late for what-ifs. Kenny could already see the writing on the wall. The new supervisor, the one they'd brought in to save money, had failed spectacularly. The entire plant was on the brink, and Kenny knew that this was his moment to step back in. Kenny couldn't fix the damage done with a snap of his fingers, but he could expose it. He had the evidence, the knowledge, and the experience. He knew exactly where to strike, to make them feel the consequences of their decisions. He reached out to George Lawson, a former client, now working for one of the company's biggest customers, Meridian Energy Solutions. George was a no-nonsense guy who respected Kenny, and if Kenny could get him on his side, there was a chance to force Western Plains into a corner. Kenny knew that the company's relationship with Meridian Energy was key to their survival. If the quality of the products went south, they would be the first to demand an audit. "I'm telling you, George," Kenny said as they met at a local diner, "you have to do your own quality check. They're cutting corners, and I've got the proof." George's eyes narrowed as he looked at the pictures Kenny had brought. Pictures of defective pressure valves that had shipped in the last month. "You're right," George said after a long silence. "This is bad. I'll talk to the board." It wasn't much, but it was a start. If Meridian took action, it would send ripples through the entire company, enough to make them realize they couldn't sweep this under the rug. The reckoning days passed, and everything Kenny had feared was finally unfolding. The plant was operating at half capacity. Maintenance requests went ignored, and when the hydraulic press finally failed, the moment Kenny had been expecting, it was like everything crashed down all at once. The press was the heart of the plant, and its failure stopped everything. Leonard Wright, the man who had replaced Kenny, called him up early in the morning, his voice strained with desperation. "Kenny, we have a situation," he said. "The main press is down. We need you to come in and fix it." Kenny didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in an hour," he said, but there were terms. He wasn't going back without leverage. "I want full control over the repairs," Kenny told Leonard. "My team, my decisions, and full access to the maintenance records for the past 6 months." The tension was palpable when Kenny stepped back onto the factory floor. It was like a ghost had returned to reclaim its rightful place. Jason was there, looking helpless, but Kenny could see the flicker of hope in his eyes. It took 3 days to repair the press, 3 days to expose the cracks in the system that had been hidden for far too long. During those days, Kenny's plan unfolded. Meridian suspended orders. The safety board launched a full-scale investigation, and Axiom Partners, Western Plains' parent company, sent in their own team. On the 3rd day, Leonard was gone, reassigned to corporate headquarters. The new operations director, Thomas Whitfield, pulled Kenny into his office. He offered Kenny a position, but Kenny refused. "I don't need a title," Kenny said. "I just need to rebuild what you tore down." In the end, Kenny didn't go back for the title. He went back for the people, for the work that had been his life. And when he stepped onto that floor once more, the machines were humming again, as if they recognized their old caretaker had returned.